Hey everybody, welcome back. In today's video, I want to talk about skills versus experience and how you use that when trying to become consistently profitable. I'm going to use a little analogy from my high school wrestling days to put this into context. Stick with me. I think it'll make perfectly good sense to you. You can apply this to anything, but I'm going to use my wrestling story. You see, when I first started learning how to wrestle, I went to a high school that in our state kind of had a dynasty. I mean, they were expected to win. And there I was on the mat, my first year of wrestling practice, trying to learn the basic skills to survive, in that combat arena. If any of you have wrestled out there, you know what I'm talking about. I think wrestlers are probably, one of the most in shape athletes out there. At least that was my experience. You may have an experience. You're more than welcome to disagree with me. That's not really the point of the video. But I had the raw materials. I had the height. I had the physique. I was a two-sport athlete in high school, wrestling and football. So I had the raw materials to be successful on the wrestling mat. I just didn't know what the hell I was doing. And more skilled wrestlers out there, even on my own team, would just pound on me. And I kept coming back day after day, week after week. By the end of that season, I'd gotten a little bit better. And going into my sophomore year of high school, I was getting to where I could pretty much hold my own with the juniors and seniors. Still wrestling junior varsity, but we had some pretty good scrimmages in the wrestling room. Didn't yet have enough ability to beat them, although I did was able to score points from time to time. But I kept grinding through that second year, and in that third year, that's when things started to take off. I think all the hours in the weight room for football, made me scratch that. All the hours that I spent in the gym, bulking up and getting strong for football, made me uncharacteristically strong for my weight class. And the coach that we had recognized this and, taught me a move, called the Wizard, which if you watch MMA today, you can still see it. It's basically when, someone's got their arm kind of cranked up underneath their opponent in their armpit area, and you're able to exert a tremendous amount of leverage. And, that move, became my signature move, and was able to start racking up wins pretty consistently in my junior year. Now we'd go out of state to bigger tournaments and such, and I'd still get mopped up by some of the more seasoned wrestlers, but they knew they'd been in a fight. That move I had put a tremendous amount of pressure on the shoulder joint of my competitors, and so I kind of stuck with that, and that was my default go back to move when things got a little hairy. Now that doesn't mean I wasn't trying other things, trying to add to the skills that I could use on the wrestling mat. Of course I was. Like I said, I went to a high school that was expected to win. And that involved constantly trying to get better. But I never shied far away from uh, that move, that wizard move. And as I went into my senior year, I was pretty much unstoppable. So that's the course of 3 years that it took to get to a spot where I was now the guy mopping everybody else up. Ended up placing in state that year. Didn't win it. Ended up taking third, and won that match by default because the guy that I was going up against, was being recruited pretty heavily by universities and didn't want to risk an injury for a third place medal in state championships by my wizard. So, skills versus experience. If you're watching these videos, you've got some skills. You've got skill, or you're on a path to acquire them. That is the framework of your trading strategy. And your trading strategy encompasses a couple of different things. It encompasses the mechanics of your decisions around placing a trade. It could be your indicators that you're using, or you may use support and resistance levels or fair value gaps, as a means to decide whether or not you're going to take a trade. But do you have the experience? And the experience takes time. Now, the second piece of that strategy is the whole mental side of the game. What emotions are you feeling when you're deciding whether or not to enter a trade or not? Those emotions and how you respond to them, I think are, at least in my experience, are what will either cause you to consistently suffer or consistently get better over time to where you come out on the other side, making money. So going back to that skills versus experience again. You've got skills, now you need experience. How do you get experience? It takes time. It takes reps. It takes consistently applying your strategy and honing it until it wins more times than it loses. And I know there's a lot of people out there that contest the whole theory of, or not theory, but, what is the percentage win rate of a good trading strategy? And I think what works for me may not work for somebody else, and what works for somebody else may not work for me. It really just boils down to, what are you trying to accomplish, and how much time do you have to devote on a daily basis to your trading? People that are day trading out there, they're never going to achieve a high percentage win rate. It's a numbers game for them, but they can make money, with a 40 to 50% win rate, because they're letting winners run, and they're cutting their losses short, or they're using trailing stops, or whatever the case may be. That method does not work for me, because if you've watched any of my previous videos, that I work a full-time job in a chemical plant, and therefore being glued to my phone or checking the charts isn't something that I can do. Trust me, I tried early on, but it wasn't conducive. It caused me to not pay attention to what I was doing at work, not paying attention to what was happening in the market. My time was divided. And although I would consider myself, very skilled at the ability to multitask, those are two very demanding arenas, um, and it's hard to excel at both. So, I adopted more of a short-term uh, swing strategy or short-term scalp strategy. Where my setups are designed to get me into the market and out within just a couple of days, with a nice move. Not a huge move, but a nice move. One that allows me to, add profits to my trading account to increase my position size over time. It's not a sprint. It's not something that you do overnight. It's something that happens over time. And, I talked about in previous videos, treating trading as a business, and starting a business. And when you're starting a business, things start slow. But you start making some sales and you gain momentum. And that's the difference in trading. And you start winning some trades, after you figure things out, and you start gaining some momentum. But it doesn't happen in a week, it doesn't happen in a month, it doesn't happen in 6 months. I would say it probably doesn't happen in a year either. I think the sweet spot is, 1.5 to 3 years. If you consistently show up and practice getting better at the skill of trading. That doesn't mean you're not going to win right away. Also doesn't mean you're not going to lose right away. Matter of fact, that's pretty much a guarantee. And it's how you respond to those losers is what's going to decide whether or not, you last very long in this game. Because you're going to lose. And if you identify with that loss, if you let that loss define you, affect your psychology, then you've got more experience to gain. And the inverse of that would be those winners. You let those winners make you think you've got it all figured out, and it's just gravy from here on out. You're in for a disappointment, my friend, because those losses will come. And it's through gaining that experience on how you react to those losses is, really the most important thing. And I think that's what I mean when I'm talking about skills versus experience. You've got some skills. Now you got to develop the experience to utilize them to your benefit. Man, that sun's bright this morning, folks. And remember this: I know when you're new at learning how to do something, you invest a lot of time on educating yourself about the process, and that's not a bad thing. That's actually very good, and I would recommend that. What I wouldn't recommend is hopping around from one strategy to the other, not giving anything enough time to work, not spending enough time gaining experience with the strategy that you're using. Now you need to qualify it, of course. Do you have a strategy that that has a chance of working long term? And you do that by backtesting it. Backtest that strategy against historical data. If you don't know how to do it, there's a ton of videos out there that'll teach you how to do it. I've got a number of them on the early videos on this channel. Kind of walk you through the mechanics. Pretty simple. All you're really doing is once you got a chart loaded up, you're rewinding back in time, and you're advancing your chart one bar at a time, and applying your strategy rules. Logging your trades, and at the end of a year, see what the outcome is. Not a year in time, just a year in data. Just take a couple hours. Once you've done that a couple of times, in a particular market, whatever that may be, whatever your interest is, Uh, I'd recommend sticking to a couple of different markets. A couple of different symbols, if you will, whether it be stocks or futures or options. Stick with one, two, maybe three of them. And test out that strategy, back test that strategy, see if it gives you a consistent uh, win versus loss percentage, and then start small and start to apply it. If you've done your homework, maybe you're ready to start doing it live. A safer transition would be to just forward test on a simulated account. You're still going to feel some of those emotions I was talking about. Whether it's fear of missing out or second guessing yourself, because we all want to be right. We all want to make right decisions. We all want to win. It sucks when you lose money. It, it's a whole different ball game when you got live money on the line. But the act of working through, some of those emotions and testing your strategy, will help you gain control over those emotions. You're never going to conquer them. You're always going to feel them. Most important thing is that you recognize that it's happening and you pivot. You adapt. You don't let it influence. You don't let the emotions influence your decision. You make your decisions based off of the results you've seen while backtesting your strategy. And that's really the name of the game. Taking skills, gaining experience, being willing to stick with something long enough to see a result. On that, I'm going to go ahead and end this video. Getting close to the plant. Time to go pound out another shift. So, it's Monday. Had a great weekend. Hope you guys did too. Have a blessed day. See you on the next clip.